Hi, welcome to my channel, Reader Woman. My name's Judy, and let's talk books. In particular, I wanted to talk about Monkey Beach by Eden Robinson. Let's see. Oops. It changed pages on me. Let's see if you can see that. And this was a selection of the Read Around the World Book Club, which is hosted by Mel's Bookland Adventures. I joined the book club last month for May, and I was very pleasantly surprised. I liked Monkey Beach quite a bit. It's a story about a young woman, Lisa Marie Hill, who has a younger brother, Jimmy, and being raised by her mother and father in a small town, Kitamaat. They're part of the First Nations tribe called the Haisla, and they live in somewhat remote along the coast of British Columbia, but up north. Not to Alaska, but you know, it's a good distance from Vancouver, which is, you know, the primary city in British Columbia. So first off, I live on the border. You know, not on the border town, but I live in Bellingham, Washington. So I was, of course, pleased that this book was talking about my neck of the woods. I don't know a lot of the history, but I know some. And I did try to make a video on this book before, but I felt like I didn't quite get to the point. And so I wanted to start with the very name, Monkey Beach. I live in a town that we see a major mountain, also can be an active volcano, although Mount Baker hasn't blown in many years. But Mount Baker, Vancouver, Bellingham, these are all, in this case, British names, but we have islands out in my neck of the woods, Susha, Meisha, Paidos. The names that we see in our cartography, in our modern cartography, are for the most part English or Spanish. And so when you see Monkey Beach for this, you know, a place where Lisa Marie and her brother, mother and father, go for a picnic because her brother is determined he's going to take a picture of Sasquatch, who lives on that little island. So they tie up at Monkey Beach. Once again, from the very beginning, this is land that the Haislas had, I'm sure, gathered, you know, fish, shellfish, berries, root vegetables, you know, etc., for thousands of years, and yet it's called Monkey Beach. I thought that was interesting. In fact, you know, for her generation and her parents' generation, everyone had an anglicized name. You know, she was Lisa Marie, her brother Jimmy. There was the ties to the Haisla tribe were getting thinner and thinner. And the fact that the book is called by some anglicized name for some reason, just kind of, you start the book understanding that as a First Nationer, you also they have to live in land that no longer has the native, you know, what they would have called it 100, 200 years ago. In fact, just an interesting point, we have changed our inland waterways. The names now is considered the Salish Sea. So there are bits and pieces. Mount Shuksan, which is for us a Native American, but just to be clear, Native Americans in America, I would call Native Americans because they were here first. In Canada, they're called First Nations. So similar tribes and everything, but very different terminology. So I just wanted to be clear about that. It's an interesting book in several ways. It's told through Lisa Marie. However, the more I was thinking about it, you encounter her as a young girl. Her uncle arrives. She tells stories about her uncle, whom she adores, her mother and her father, her brother, her cousins, her grandmother, and she tells them in a very childlike way, so that you see there's more to the story as an adult reader than the narrator quite knows at the time. But you know, and then you come across her voice in her early 20s, which that's where it starts. She and her family are in the unfortunate position of waiting to hear news about her brother who has been lost at sea. And that storyline has been interwoven throughout the whole novel. And I thought, well, very well done, because when you're waiting for news, you're just sitting there and all you can do is think about old stories, and if you're a smoker, smoke cigarettes. If you're a coffee drinker, drink coffee, you know, or eat chocolates or whatever, but you're just anxiously waiting for news. So it makes sense that she's going back through her mind and remembering all of these things that, that helps her try to find a way that she feels like she might be able to find her brother. And that's, of course, later on in the book. But I did wanted to read a few quotes because this was one thing that captured me very early on. Her description of the kelp. Kelp, the color of brown beer bottles, rose from the bottom, tall and thin with bulbs on top, each bulb with long strands growing out of it, as flat as noodles, waving in the tide. What a great description of our kelp beds. As well as these two voices, it's my contention that we have a third. And I believe we have an older voice of Lisa's as well, that she is talking far beyond where the 20-year-old would be able to converse. So I wanted to just say that, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that, let's see here. What I mean is the narrator, there's three voices. There has to be at least three voices because it's quite easy to get lost. But I mean, at the beginning of certain chapters, you know, she's talking about the heart, and she's talking about the complexity of the biology of it, and the fact that hearts stop and that hearts break, and, you know, et cetera, which are things that I don't believe 20-year-old Lisa would have been able to have put coherently together. Lisa's a smart kid. I'm not denying that at all. She's very bright, but at the same token, she's back home after spending a couple of years in Vancouver. She's back home trying to recover from drug and alcohol addiction. She had a tough childhood. And the other part of this story, which also I think explains partly why she also did turn to drugs and alcohol, is that from a very early age, she had the ability to hear voices in the woods. And she saw, you know, you might call it a wood sprite, you might call it, but something not real. And even at a very early age, she understood that it wasn't a real thing, and yet it was kind of like a guide to her, letting her know something big was going to happen soon. Having studied a bit of shamanism, and more in Alaska than in lower tribes, I think it makes sense that her grandmother was shamanic without being, you know, termed in her society that way. But, you know, she had a ritual that she did for her dead husband, to both celebrate him and also celebrate the fact that he was no longer there. And then she taught her granddaughter a lot of these things. And so for me, I don't have a problem with the voices. I think she just had a gift that allowed her to experience more than most of us do. And so, but that was something that was very difficult for her as a young child and a young woman. And I can only imagine how confusing it would be to know, oh my gosh, whose voice am I hearing now? And so I think that, of course, you would reach for something that would shut down those voices and numb you out to them, so you didn't have to deal with that part. Let's see here. Some other quotes that I loved very much is, I used to think that if I could talk to the spirit world, I'd get some answers. Ha, bloody ha. I wish the dead would just come out and say what they mean, instead of being so passive-aggressive about the whole thing. And then, in conjunction with her brother, this quote, as I stand by the window, the channel is dull gray-blue under the clouds. The Greeks ironically call the Black Sea Euxinos, friendly to strangers. Those who know the ocean know it doesn't make friends. Excitio est avidum mare nautis. The greedy sea is there to be a doom for sailors. Now right there, I feel like we are talking about that third voice, the older Lisa voice. I'm not sure that I really believe she would have been able to have quoted that at 20. But I think as an older woman who has found her way, perhaps through education, to, you know, I mean, in some ways the author's like saying Lisa wrote this book down the road. But I thought that was a particularly appropriate quote. And then the next one I pulled out, and the last one. All graveyards should have moss-covered trees creaking in the wind, and the sound of waves grating the round stones on the beach. No neat row of crosses, no meticulous lawn, no carefully tended flowers will guide you. Too sterile and aseptic. Headstones carved into eagles, blackfish, ravens, beavers appear seemingly at random. In the time of the great dying, whole families were buried in one plot. Pick wild blueberries when you're hungry. Let the tart taste sink into your tongue, followed by that sharp sweetness that store-bought berries lack. Realize that the plumpest berries are over the graves. She did, Eden Robinson did a great job of, for me at least, of bringing our wild coast to life. There are so many bays and inlets and water and tides rising and lowering without waves. Just the scent, the fog that can just blur out huge rocks, rocky mountains. The sometimes never-ending rain. And how hard it is making a living close to the water. Anyways, I really highly recommend the book. I would give it a good 4 stars. It wasn't the best book I've ever read, but it was a very good book, and I liked it on many levels, and yeah, I hope you give it a try. We will talk books again soon. Take care. Bye.